Now, the Palestinian Prime Minister has called on the international community to recognize Palestine as a state if Israel goes ahead with its plan to annex the West Bank. Speaking at a press conference, Mohammed Shataya also called for a global, strong position to rein in Israel. The annexation plan that is expected to be carried out in July has drawn fierce backlash. Reports suggest that the EU will mull sanctions on Israel if it implements the plan. The Arab League has also warned that the move constitutes a new war crime against the Palestinians. Now, to discuss that further, we're joined by Saib Shah, author and Middle East affairs expert, joining us live from Belfast, and of course, Mr. Robert Fontina, author, activist, and journalist, who is also joining us on this edition of the News Review. Let's begin with our first guest, Mr. Saib Shah. Now, how likely do you see this annexation process becoming actually happening? And let's then discuss what moves Palestinians can take.
See, Netanyahu repeatedly stated that after they took East Jerusalem and annexed it, and the Trump administration recognized Jerusalem as the capital or eternal capital of the Zionist entity, he wants now to annex parts of the West Bank, which is for religious and economical and security purposes, on the 1st of July. And as well, he is trying to, or he declared he's going to annex the Jordan Valley. The Jordan Valley, consists of 28% of the West Bank, and it's the main agricultural land for the Palestinians. And it's the only connecting area for them with the outside world, so they can go through it to Jordan. Annexing that will sandwich the Palestinians between colonial armed settlers. And what the Palestinian himself, Mohammed Shataya, the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, when he says he wants the European and the Arabs to recognize the state of Palestine and to take a strong position, will be sufficient enough to rein in Israel. I disagree with that. If you allow me, Europe and the EU invested politically and economically heavily in the two-state solutions. And these two-state solutions now is gone because the land itself in the West Bank is non-existent. So what the Europeans going to recognize, or the Arab, non-existing state for the Palestinians. With the Trump loot of the century, or as he calls it, the deal of the century, that will recognize the Zionist annexation of the Palestinian land. U.S. Secretary of State himself, Pompeo, visiting the Zionist entity, is part to finalize what he said himself about the planned annexation. When he said a few weeks ago, a decision whether or not to annex parts of the West Bank is up to Israel. So Europe, where was Europe or the Arabs going to stand in here? Europe is called by the George W. Bush is the old continent, the useless continent, which he means, weak in facing a Trump administration. And as well, the Arabs actors, who's the Arab actors here? Who's the strong Arab actors? The Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, who's in real alliance, a strategic alliance, is under the table with the Zionist entity. And if they say any condemnation is just to appease their own people. So the only solution I can see here is Abbas to fulfill what he promised when he said last week, if they annex 1 inch of the West Bank, he will dissolve the Palestinian Authority. What that means, he's going to collapse the security branches as well, which is collaborate with the Zionist military forces in there, reining in the Palestinian resistance. And this is the key. If the Palestinian resistance come back to the West Bank, all of their plans has gone down the drain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saab Shah. Let's turn to Mr. Robert Fantina. So we heard Mr. Shah and his elaborated picture of what might happen in the future. What is your opinion, Mr. Fantina? And do you think that Palestinians are, of course, expecting the Arab League and the international community to take a strong stance, but with a look at history, could we actually expect that from them, expect something to happen?
It's unlikely there'll be any decisive action taken, but we have to remember that Israel is now pushing the situation far beyond what anyone had thought it would. The U.S. government has allowed it to do this, although the Trump administration and the U.S. government are not in a position to give Palestine to anybody or to allow this. But the European Union and some other countries have made strong statements against this potential annexation. It is a violation of international law, and all these countries at least pay lip service to adhering to and supporting and respecting international law. And this will be a blatant and just flagrant violation of it. And hopefully this is beyond what the leaders of these countries can tolerate. Because if Israel starts annexing more Palestinian lands, who knows where it will stop. And this is what other countries have to be aware of. I also want to comment on your other commentators' remarks about Abbas and his threat to end security coordination with Israel. This should have been done years ago. Abbas has enabled the occupation. He has supported it against his own people. It is high time for him to make good on this threat, which he's made repeatedly in the past and never followed up on. But if the occupation is more difficult for Israel, then that would prevent some of Israel's actions. But Abbas has aided and abetted Israel in the occupation of their own people. It is high time for that to stop. Abbas cannot control what the European Union does, what the Arab League does, but he can control his own actions. And ceasing security coordination with Israel would be the first thing to making a positive step, and it's something, as I mentioned, he needs to do for his own people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fantina. Now, Mr. Shah, we're almost running out of time. If you could please wrap up your thoughts regarding this development in case it happens, and what we can expect.
I don't think Abbas will dissolve the Palestinian Authority, and to indicating that what the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority is saying, if the European recognize the state of Palestine with the Arabs, that will be sufficient enough to rein the Israelis' action. This means the conditional statement, it's in its own betrays that Abbas is not intending to dissolve the Palestinian Authority. He said that before. For the West and for the United States of America and the Arab reactionaries, is the golden cow in here. It's the cooperation between the Palestinians and the Israelis in securing security for the colonial settlers in the West Bank. If this is the functions of Palestinian Authority. If this collapses, then of course we're going to see in the West Bank mayhem. The West Bank is very close to the heart of Tel Aviv, to the heart of West Jerusalem, and the rest of that. So the entity itself, the existence, the project will be under a threat. And the European always supported the two-state solution, and that to secure a viable existence of the entity, Zionist entity on the historical Palestine. With the looting of the land of the West Bank and the Valley of Jordan, this another state for the Palestinians is not existent. So it's a must resistant, must be a factor there to make the Zionist occupation of the West Bank cost them heavy. And this way we can see a different scenario. We can see collapsing even of the Zionist entity, because it's going to move toward an apartheid state in that way. To be racist against another nation, the Arabs under it. And in that way, Europe won't be able to send the dime to there, as it happens in South Africa. So this is the next coming step. Europe trying to save Israel from this ultra right-wing government which Netanyahu is leading.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fantina. Your final thoughts. We have about 2 minutes left.
Arab nations that are trading with Israel or coordinated with it in any way do so at their own risk. This is not a government that can be trusted. These nations are going to pay a price in the future. They need now to stand up for the Palestinians, to demand that that the occupation end, and certainly that annexation not take place. The government of Mahmoud Abbas must cease all security coordination with Israel. I've said this before many times, and he only helps to enable the occupation, and is a betrayal of his own people. This must end. The European nations, many of them have passed non-binding resolutions recognizing Palestine. They must now make those legal. They must now recognize Palestine and begin to support it in a real way by condemning the occupation, by recognizing that the Palestinian people are entitled to self-determination, as is anybody in the world, and that it is Israel that is depriving of that in the most brutal manner possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robert Fantina, author and activist and journalist, and also Mr. Saab Shaf, author and Middle East affairs expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your opinions and sharing those with us, and thanks to all of our viewers for following this edition of the News Review.